Recently, our friends at the Institute of Marriage and Family Canada conducted a study to find out how marriage benefits children and adults in Canada. And their findings were, let's say, not shocking, but reaffirmed why marriage is so important to the society we live in and even our financial state. Joining us in Ottawa is Peter Jon Mitchell, senior researcher at the Institute of Marriage and Family Canada, to discuss these findings even further. Welcome, Peter Jon.
Oh, thanks for having me on.
So why did the IMFC decide to do this study?
Well, we do get calls from time to time from people who are wanting to help out maybe a friend or a neighbor or a relative that's struggling in their marriage, or even from pastors or community leaders that are looking for research that would be encouraging to people to keep on sticking with it, to kind of push through those rough patches in marriage. And so we decided that we would pull all these resources together, all these studies together. And the key that we wanted for this particular report was to look at Canadian data. What is Canadian data? What does the study of the Canadian population say about marriage and its impact on both children and on adults?
Now, as I mentioned, the findings are not really surprising per se, but really reaffirming the Institute of Marriage.
That's right, and that's one of the reasons why we want to do the study as well. We find that marriage offers benefits to both parents, to both adults, and to children as well. We find that marriage, despite all that you hear about divorce rates and 50-50, 50% of marriages end in divorce, that kind of thing, it's actually not a true stat. It's actually a bit less than that in Canada. So marriage is doing better than sometimes it's talked about in the popular culture, and there are benefits to marriage. It is more stable, and that stability offers good things for adults, for children.
And talking about stability, one of the findings states that marriage is more stable than cohabitation. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that just like they would buy a car, if they were going to buy a car, they would want to test drive it. They think that if they, test drive a relationship, maybe live together for a few years, that will make their marriage stronger. And in fact, that's not the case. That's not what Canadian research shows, or research around the world. In fact, it might actually increase the risk of divorce. People that live together before getting married are more likely to get divorced. We know that cohabiting relationships generally are less stable than married relationships to begin with as well. And so we know that marriage offers a certain stability, a certain emotional commitment there to build on that sometimes is lacking in cohabiting relationships. Although we're certainly seeing a growth in cohabiting relationships in Canada, and people get into those relationships in diverse ways. Sometimes they slide into them, sometimes they're more intentional. But the research still shows, even data from Statistics Canada, that marriage remains more stable.
And children born to cohabiting parents are roughly 3 times more likely to experience family breakdown of their own, which I find interesting.
Yeah, certainly when a child comes along, sometimes that does change the dynamics in a family. It does change the dynamics for all couples, but the research does show from several different studies that the likelihood of a child seeing their parents break up is much higher if they're in a cohabitating relationship than if their parents are married, or if their parents started in a cohabitating relationship and then got married. Still, the chances of breakup are a little bit higher than if the parents just entered marriage without cohabitating first.
Right. So obviously, children learn what they live. You also talk about the economic good that comes out of marriage, and that it helps our society, and financially, we do better if families are married financially.
Yeah, certainly there is a lot of evidence that would suggest that, obviously bringing two people together and the potential of sharing income, and also the balancing sort of the labor that happens within the home that doesn't get paid for, being able to negotiate those challenges throughout life, that certainly gives an advantage to families as well. But certainly there is actually a bigger economic advantage to having stable families in society. A couple of years ago, we did a study where we conservatively estimated what it costs when families dissolve. And the rough cost to the government, to the taxpayer, is about $7 billion a year. So that's about the cost of hosting the Vancouver Olympics every year, due to when families disintegrate, whether that's involving social services, involvement of the court, all these other things that maybe we don't always think about, but that does affect the rest of society around us. And of course, when we have more stable homes, then we have increasing sort of opportunities for kids that are growing up in those homes. The one thing I should say, Maggie, of course, is that family structure is very important. It's not destiny. So certainly kids growing up in different diverse family backgrounds can and do succeed in life. Certainly lots of examples of people that have come out of all kinds of different family backgrounds and are successful. But when we look overall at the statistics, we do see an advantage to having a married parent family.
And I think that's a good point for us to end on, that, yeah, we don't always have control over what happens in our marriage, and sometimes there is divorce or separation. But what you're saying is that when having the choice of fighting it out, sometimes it's good to stick with it and to stay with your marriage if you can, if it's safe to, because there are benefits to doing so.
Right. Yes, when it's safe to do so. That's another important point to make. Yeah.
Thank you again, Peter Jon. This is great information, and I think it's encouraging to us and the church to continue to encourage our married couples and to be an outreach for them as well.